Hey everybody, welcome to the Barbecue Culture Podcast. Hey, today we're going to be talking about a basic rib method. Why don't you sit down and grab yourself a cold one, maybe a cup of coffee depending on what time it is, and just kind of tune in and let's talk about ribs today. You're listening to the Barbecue Culture Podcast. Hey fellas, thanks for joining in. I'm sitting out here on the front porch. I'm trying not to be too loud for the neighbors and stuff. A little bit of a story here is that, I live out here on 10 acres, but you'd swear my neighbor's dogs are like 10 feet away when I get them wound up. And usually they hear a pin drop out here and they started barking, so bear with me. Just felt like doing a podcast out here on the front porch today because hummingbirds are here. It's a beautiful Sunday, and I got a cold beverage in my hand, and it's a good day. So anyway, wanted to be out here enjoying it. So, we have our website there, ask.thebbqculture.net. And on that podcast website there, what we're asking you to do when you go there is just answer a simple question. What is the biggest thing you struggle with when cooking on your pit? And there's been a few people that have called in or messaged in and on that little forum there, and they've said, it sure would be helpful to have a good rib recipe. And all we've been talking about lately has been technical information about smokers and how to run them, and felt we'd break it up just a little bit. So what we're doing here is we're going to talk about ribs. So butchered up a few hogs in my time, and really like doing that. And there's the traditional way to cut up a hog, but there's really no wrong way. Cut it up however you like it. And when you go to the store, you're buying two kinds of ribs off a pig. You're getting what's called baby backs, or you're getting what's called spare ribs. And a third thing you might see in there labeled up called St. Louis cut ribs. And really, is there three different kinds of ribs on the hog? No, there's actually just one great big rib cage. Those are just different ways that the hog gets cut up. So what we like to do is when we're cutting up a pig is you'll get him. If you buy one, you'll buy a whole hog, and sometimes you can buy a half a hog, and we've bought them both ways. And you take a saw, or we use a Sawzall, whatever. If you're a pro, you might have an actual bone saw, or maybe even a band saw of sorts, but we use a Sawzall. And usually a good wood blade, and we'll cut right down the spinal cord. And then you flip that hog over, and his skin's out at that point. And on touching the spinal cord is you're going to have what's called the loin. And that there's the tenderloin, and then there's the backstrap loin, which is the big loin you buy. Tenderloin's actually kind of on the inside of the rib cage, and then the strip loin or the big loin is running along the top of the rib cage where it meets the spinal cord. And a lot of guys will take and saw that off and leave those bones, the rib bones, attached to the back of that big. If you ever seen those bone-in, chops that you see that are cut, about an inch thick or so, that's the top end of the rib cage that's attached to that strip loin. And then what's left over is what we would call the spare ribs after that. So the spare ribs is a big chunk of ribs. They're tall bones. The upper part of the rib cage, we would cut that up. Those rib bones would be called loin back ribs or baby back ribs. And so that's where the ribs come from. It's one rib cage, one great big giant side of pork. But the difference is that rib cage has been sawed horizontally along parallel with the spinal cord, and it's been sawed about 4 or 5 inches away from the spinal cord. That way you've got, the baby backs there. And then somebody that's real good with a knife, if you want meaty ribs, then you would run that flexible boning knife or whatever kind of knife you got, and you would just take your time and you'd fillet that loin out and leave meat on the top of the ribs, the rib bones there, and then the bottom half is where the bacon's at. So on the top of on the spares, as they go down closer to the belly of the pig, that's where we get our pork belly, which makes bacon. And you just got to kind of be careful there too. You're kind of cutting that pork belly off and leaving a good amount of ribs, a good amount of meat on the ribs. Anyway, so the bottom half of that rib cage, that's what we're going to work on today, is the spares. And the method works, better with spares when you say 3, 2, 1, because we're going to have a little bit more meat on a spare, honestly, a little bit more weight. If you were going to try this with baby backs, we might go more towards a 2, 2, 1 or a 2, 1, 1 or something like that, depending on your amount, your temperature you're cooking at. So what we want to do then is we're going to take that rib cage. You bought spares. You went down to the grocery store, you bought spare ribs. We're going to take that rib cage, and on the bony side, there's this membrane, typically. Sometimes you can buy them peeled, sometimes they're not. So we're going to take that membrane and we're going to try to peel that off. Now, I prefer it peeled completely off, but some guys will say just go ahead and take a knife and just, cut it and score it and just run along the rib bones perpendicular to them. Just put a whole bunch of little slices on there and then count for that in your cooking method. And that's fine too. You can do it either way. But if you peel them off completely, you're going to wind up with a lot more tender rib. So to peel that membrane, the best tool I've ever had in my hands to do this with is a paper towel and a spoon, just a good old spoon out of your, like you'd eat with out of your kitchen. I usually use a smaller one, like for a coffee cup kind of spoon. And you turn that with the open side of the spoon towards the meat, and the rounded back part of that spoon will be up facing you. And you're going to start in the middle of the rib cage and just take that spoon and kind of just start to kind of scrape at the bone a little bit, and you'll start to see that layer of silver skin or that leathery membrane start to kind of peel loose from the meat a little bit. And then you work that spoon down in between two bones, and you just kind of keep going at it a little bit. And once you get, enough, about an inch in there, so then you can take your finger, put the spoon down, take your finger and start running it. I usually have my fingernail up and the bottom of my finger towards the meat. And I want to just kind of take that fingernail a little bit and just kind of push like I was with the spoon, but kind of wiggle it upward. That way the membrane starts to kind of tear loose from the meat. And as you go along in between those two bones, at one time or another, you're going to make it all the way across. And then I'm going to hold that rib. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to hold that slab of ribs in my left hand, and I'm going to hook the membrane with the inner part of my finger, and I'm just going to pull them apart. And what will happen is most of that membrane is going to peel away from the ribs, and you might have a little bitty strip that's left on there. Usually there's like a cut or something that happened in the butcher process, that'll make it tear loose. So anyway, take that membrane, rip it off of there and throw it away. And then this is where the paper towel comes in, because that little strip that was left, you're going to grab that with a paper towel. And the reason we use a paper towel is because that skin's going to be full of moisture and a little bit of, pork blood there, and it's going to be kind of hard to grab and slippery. And that paper towel gives you just enough friction that you can grab that and grab a hold of the very fine end of that little piece that's left, and then you just tear it right off. It comes off fairly easy because it's skinny. So anyway, that's how we remove the membrane. Now, as far as the 3-2-1 method or the 2-2-1 method or whatever numbers you want to put in there, what that is a time. So we're gonna cook 2 hours, or the 3-2-1. We're gonna cook 3 hours, and then we're gonna do something to it, and we're gonna cook 2 more hours, and then we're gonna do something to it, and then we're gonna cook 1 more hour. That's why we say 3-2-1. Now 2-2-1 is meaning that we're shaving off an hour on baby backs that are going to cook faster. So typically, we're going to do 2 hours, then do something, then 2 hours, then do something, then 1 hour. So that method is a great starting point. So now we've got the rib membrane pulled off of there. We're going to go ahead and season up our ribs. And there's no wrong way. You can use SPG, whatever you want. But a very wise man that he doesn't know me from Adam, but I sure have watched a lot of his channel on YouTube, named Malcolm Reed. It's called How to BBQ Right. That's his channel. And, that's where I watched my first time learning how to cook a slab of ribs. And what he says to do, and I agree with this wholeheartedly, it's why I've done it so long. You want to get a good all-purpose, just a salty SPG kind of just a good old-fashioned rub. Nothing crazy. You can use Head Country. A lot of competition cooks for a long time used a rub called Smoking Guns Hot. That was the biggest thing. I mean, that rub has been around, and it's been the same rub for as long as I've been cooking around it. And it's a good rub to use. But you want to use a good all-purpose rub. And what we're going to do is we're going to rub the meat down with that. But you can either just use a binder like extra virgin olive oil, or you can use yellow mustard, just plain yellow mustard, or nothing at all. And just, if you're going to use the mustard olive oil, go ahead and slop it down with that a little bit, and then put your rub on there. And, to be completely honest, I've never really noticed a difference with using some kind of a binder on there, but it does help kind of moisten up the rub and help it to absorb into the first little layer of skin there, meat that's left. So, but anyway, you're going to rub the rub on there and let it, kind of pat it down. They call it rub, but we're not going to rub it in. We're just going to pat it in. And then we're going to flip the bone side down and do the top side. Same way. You can slather it with some kind of binder, or you can just, put the rub directly on, either way. And, I've learned that if you hold that shaker up high and you just give it a good consistent wiggle, and you're going to be able to get more control over your dispersion of the rub as you're putting it on there and get a more even coat. And the way we're going to do this, we're going to do layers. So we don't want to put a real heavy coating of rub on. We're just going to take the all-purpose and put a good, even, light coat on the meat side of these ribs. Then we're going to take and flip them over while that's kind of sweating, and we're going to put the other layer. Now on this layer, we're going to use a sweeter layer, something a lot of guys used over the years is this Cimarron Docks rib rub. That's a pretty good sweet one. I like to use Pork Mafia makes one called Memphis Mud. That's kind of the one I like. And you're just going to go ahead and put a light coat of that second layer of rub on there. We're going to layer our flavors in there, and we'll talk about that in a little bit later. So you do the bone side, and then you flip them over, and then you do the meat side the same way. Now we're going to let those ribs sit out for about 15 minutes just on the counter in room temperature, and we're going to let that rub kind of start to emulsify, is what it's called. The rub is going to start to take on moisture. It's going to be drawing moisture from inside the meat. That's why we put our salty all-purpose rub on first. It draws the moisture out, and it starts to emulsify the rub and start to help it break down, and it's going to basically dry, what is that called? Brine. Dry brine the meat is what it's going to do. So after, all that's sitting there sweating and all that, we're going to go out and get the pit fired up. And I like to run my pit about 275 when I'm cooking ribs. Now, you can run lower if you want. It's just going to take longer to cook, or you can run hotter. If you run hotter, you're going to have to be a little more careful that the rub and stuff doesn't just burn and create a real bad bark, burnt bark. 275 seems to be about the perfect temperature. And this will work on any kind of a smoker, whether you're using a pellet grill or a electric smoker with pellets in it, or little wood shavings, or if you're going to use a stick burner or an ugly drum, whatever. Doesn't even matter. Gravity feed works the same. So anyway, now that the pit's up to temp, we're going to go ahead and slap these ribs on there, and I put bone side down first. There's all different ways, but I prefer to put the bone side down first and just kind of let the meat come up to temperature. And I like to do it about 30-minute spots. A lot of guys go in there and they kind of spritz the ribs every so often. That's personal preference. I really just try to just leave the pit shut, for the first 30 minutes or so. And then we're going to go inside and just kind of chill out and let the ribs cook. When we come back out, we're going to flip them over for just a little bit, and we're going to rotate them. And you want to be kind of careful so you don't just smear all the rub off dragging them across the cooking grate or something, but just carefully flip them over and rotate them 180 degrees and cook for about 15 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that. And what we're looking for is more color than anything. We're looking to get the meat up to about 150, something like that, 155. And once the meat gets up to that temp, that's going to be about the two hour mark on baby backs and about the 2.5 hour mark on spares. We're going to take and get 2 layers of foil, and we're going to tear the foil off, just as long as the ribs, about 6 inches longer on each end. And we're going to set 2 layers down, and then we're going to tear off a 3rd layer for each slab of ribs. And my favorite thing in the world to do at this point is I like the butter that comes in the squirt can, the Blue Bonnet or somebody makes it. But anyway, you take that butter and you just do a little scribbly stripe right down the middle of where the ribs are going to lay. And then we're going to take a little bit of honey and just go real light, just a little bitty light coat of honey. And then whatever rib rub you were using, the sweet one, you can take and sprinkle a little bit of that rub on there, or you can use a little bit of brown sugar, whatever you want. And then you're going to pull these ribs off the cooker one at a time and set those down on there face first down in the foil. And then we're going to repeat the process on the bone side. We're going to put just a little strip of butter, a little strip of honey, and then whatever rib rub you were using, the sweet rib rub, or you can use, your brown sugar or whatever you want right there. The point is we want to get a good sweet layer on there. And then we're going to take that foil and you're going to close it up. And what I do is I set the 3rd piece of foil on top and I roll it up like a boat all the way around. That way it can't vent or nothing like that. And we're going to do that for each slab of ribs. And then the layer the side of the ribs that had 2 layers of foil goes down. So put it in there for an hour or 2 hours, depending on what your rhythm is. 3-2-1 would be 2 hours. 2-2-1 would be 2 hours. Or if you're cooking hotter, like 300, you might be doing a 2-1-1, something like that. And so you put them ribs back on there. And once your time is expired, you come back out, pull the ribs out, and you're going to open them up. And there's going to be a lot of juice in the foil, so be careful not to drip it on yourself or dump it and spill it, whatever. And when you open those up, what I've always done is I take and drain all that juice out of the foil. And I'm going to take some sauce, and I'm going to drip a little bit of sauce on there, turn the bone side down, and put the meat side up, and just kind of spread a little sauce on those ribs. And generally, I used to leave the foil open, but you can close it back up if you want. And you're going to put them back on for the final hour. And truth be told, it's probably going to be about 45 minutes. If you want the ribs to fall apart, that's fine. But if you're wanting to have the bones where you can cut them and take a bite through them, then you're probably going to want to pull those things off about, between, 30 and 45 minutes, something like that. You don't want to overcook. And so anyway, once they're done, pull them out, set them on the counter, open the foil up, and let them breathe until the steam is done. And I just don't like handling them when they're really, really hot. And then you can close that foil back up, and just once the steam stops, and just hold them for a little while if you want. Or you can go ahead and cut them up. If you cut them up right away, they might dry out. And sitting in the plate or whatever. But if you give them a little bit of a rest period, that moisture is going to tend to redistribute throughout the meat muscle and be good. So anyway, I hope that helps you a little bit. Maybe we'll do a video about this too one day soon here. Anyway, light a fire, invite somebody to the barbecue culture, and we'll see you on the smoky side.